Welcome to the first ever Behind the Briefings. This is a series about not only the origins of JKC Smart Moves, which is the foundational intelligence briefings that focus on decision making, but more importantly, this is about my thought process. I want to take you behind the scenes, so to speak, to understand what this is all about. So let me sort of backtrack a moment to understand what JKC Smart Moves is. It's the culmination of a life's work. It's a culmination of something that I will continue to do ongoing. But the fact of the matter is, I thought it was really important to explain all about this. J. Kaufman Consulting, my company, has launched JKC Smart Moves as a way to think about decision making, as a way to look at choices. JKC Smart Moves, it's designed, at least the sort of foundational intelligence system, is 6 briefings. That is it. We are beginning there, and then we are expanding. And the most important thing that we're going to sort of look at is to understand that we are living in a very volatile, ambiguous, and complex world. And all of us need a way to make better decisions, execute better. So it's important at least to begin with who I am. My name is Jonathan Kaufman. I was born with cerebral palsy. And that is important. It's an important data point because being born with cerebral palsy, it's different for everyone. I always have heard when you meet one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. But for me, it became something that has colored my entire life. But what it also did was set me on a path. And that path was to say, I want to be in the helping profession. And so I became a sort of social scientist. I studied psychology, human development, anthropology, sociology, and in daily practice, I am a psychotherapist, an applied anthropologist, and I started a consulting practice where I do consulting, executive coaching. I continue to do psychotherapy, and I work at this very sort of unique intersection. I work at the intersection of business, disability, innovation, leadership, and the future of work. That's sort of the foundation. But what I have noticed with clients over the last umpteen years is that it is about how we make choices and how we make better choices. And particularly now, both as a psychotherapist and as an executive coach, that has been fundamental. That's what people have been asking me about, and I have helped guide them through that process. So in sort of the creation of JKC Smart Moves, it was understanding how decisions are made, but it's also how we look at it in a very broad context as far as looking at a changing world. And I think all of us are sort of fearful in many ways because things are moving very quickly in a digital age, in an age where technology is taking over, AI is taking over, and that sort of human element is under siege. But the fact of the matter is, I think what's important to understand is that we are in a new era where we can sort of think about relationships and relational things, our relationship to technology, our relationship to how we integrate technology into our lives. And one of the things that I want to do in this series, Behind the Briefings, is not just talk about the 6 foundational briefings themselves, but to understand their origins, and more importantly, to set the seeds. And I want to sort of plant the seeds here so that we can build a community. I want people to feel comfortable. I want people to feel engaged in this larger conversation, because I think all of us are at a moment, including myself, where there is levels of doubt, levels of anxiety for that matter, about where do we go from here? How do we look at things? And one of the great sort of, I think, gifts that I was ever given was living with a disability. And I say that not because of sort of the world wasn't made for me exactly, but I think more importantly that in many cases, when we talk about disability, we talk about advocacy. But in my mind, in the way I have been sort of raised intellectually speaking, I have thought disability as a value asset, as a value proposition in terms of creating opportunity. And that if we look at disability through a lens where it can engage in different management styles, it can engage in creativity, it can engage in innovation, then we're really on to something. It's looking at it much differently than sort of identity politics or policy, but rather this is part of the lived experience. And a lot of what I've been writing about over the years have been about the sort of intersection of the disability and longevity economy. We know that people with disabilities and an aging economy, we're talking about people with disabilities, about 1.6 billion people on the planet. We're talking about an economy that's between 13 trillion and 18 trillion, and combine that with an aging population of about 45 trillion, we're at about 60 trillion and continuing to grow. But the fact of the matter is, if we're sort of lucky enough to age, we all sort of enter the land of disability in some way. And for many of us, we don't really sort of want to say we are disabled, but it is true functionally. So the question becomes, how do we engage it differently? How do we think about it differently? And this is sort of where JKC Smart Moves emerged. And yes, right now, there is this sort of foundational system. But the fact of the matter is that will continue to grow. But more importantly, I want those of you that watch this on a weekly basis is to understand what this is all about. What we're trying to get at here is being able to make decisions with clarity, with insight, and for you to understand who I am and where I come from. For me, this has never been about selling product at all. This is about my mission. My mission is very simple. I have always been and will always be in the helping profession. Though I'm trained in different ways in my work, in terms of my consulting work, my executive coaching work, my speaking, are all really sort of going out there and in some ways spreading a message. But just as importantly, that message and that goal, whether it's for individuals or organizations, is to always be in sort of the helping profession. There's a saying that anthropologists have, being trained as one, is that we are the professional strangers. And the professional strangers have a role in how we look at society, and in many ways sort of marginalized. And also being someone with a right hemiparesis, a form of cerebral palsy, I have always felt that I'm on the margins. And that has given me a particular perch to look at things and look at things critically and say, how can we change them? And that was such the impetus for me. And so as we begin to sort of think about this work behind the briefings, it opens up a world of imagination And I want all of you to partake in this. I want to have a dialogue and to be able to think about this. So I have my notes here. And the truth of the matter is, I am a yellow paper guy. I love sort of old school stuff. And legal pads are sort of where I write my ideas down. And I want to leave you with something today. And it's from Herbert Simon. And Herbert Simon was a psychologist, he was an economist, he was a political scientist, he was a sort of man of all trades. And he talked about the idea of decision making isn't something that's always perfectly rational, and that it isn't, rather than thinking about sort of optimizing decisions, we think we have to look at it in terms of something he sort of phrased as satisfice, where we're looking for not only what's just optimal, but what's good enough. And when we stop searching, to find where we sort of fit into what's good enough, then we can move forward and think about how do we make decisions. Because ultimately, when we're thinking about decision making, we try and make the best possible choices within the real world limits. And I think now, where all of us are sort of consumed by social media, and in many ways it's curated, where it looks sort of optimal. That's not reality. What reality is critical. And for us to think about what are we satisfied with, and how can we move forward in that capacity. So each week, I'm going to look at some ideas. I'm going to sort of bring about the JKC Smart Moves. And I want you to feel comfortable talking to me about the issues that perhaps you're facing, and where these foundational briefings can help you in terms of not only reflecting your self needs, but organizationally in the institutions in which you work. Because again, my goal is simple. I am in the helping profession. My name is Jonathan Kaufman. I'm president of J. Kaufman Consulting, and I will see you next week for Behind the Briefings.